Today, I can reveal that Meghan Markle's fakery with British Airways has just been exposed. Every single thing that she has argued in terms of her brand.
You could tell something felt strange the second the story started making rounds online. There was that weird feeling in the back of your mind screaming, "Wait a second, this doesn't add up." A British Airways cabin crew suddenly deciding, in the middle of a flight, to throw together a sweet little anniversary celebration for Meghan Markle. Out of nowhere, that alone had people raising eyebrows fast. And this is where it gets even messier. We're talking about the same airline where staff members were once rumoured to have called her one of the most difficult passengers they had ever dealt with years before Prince Harry was even part of the picture. That history didn't just disappear overnight, and people online noticed that immediately. The sudden switch-up felt way too polished and way too convenient for many viewers watching this unfold. Then came all the extra details that made the story sound almost movie-like. A handwritten card, champagne served with smiles, fancy British candies for the kids, crew members supposedly sharing emotional memories about where they were during the royal wedding day like it was some unforgettable national moment. The entire thing sounded so carefully packaged that people instantly started questioning whether this was really a spontaneous act or something designed to create headlines. And the timing? That's the part that really had social media going wild. The glowing People magazine story dropped barely 48 hours after Meghan's Geneva speech became the internet's favourite topic for criticism and jokes all weekend long. That coincidence had critics side-eyeing the whole situation hard, with many people saying the story felt less like a random, heartfelt moment and more like a carefully managed image boost, landing exactly when it was needed. Most! You weren't imagining things at all, and now even more people are starting to realise it. The reaction online wasn't random, and the timing behind this whole situation had viewers paying very close attention.
But we also got the keeping up with the Sussexes. Oh, aren't we so in love? We used to dress up as penguins. Oh yes, and we kiss. We kiss a lot. I promise you, we kiss when it's not a nanny taking the picture. Oh, and by the way, we're merching our own wedding too. This is all extraordinary stuff.
Now let's actually set the scene properly because the context behind this matters a lot. Meghan Markle attended the World Health Organization's World Health Assembly in Geneva, Switzerland on Sunday, where she delivered a speech focused on children's online safety and digital protection. On paper, it sounded like a major international appearance tied to an important global issue. The event itself was clearly designed to look serious, polished, and high profile. But then came the part nobody could stop talking about. Crowd control barriers had reportedly been set up outside the venue, giving the impression organisers were expecting large numbers of supporters, media, or excited onlookers to show up. Instead, photos and clips from the scene quickly started spreading online, and people immediately noticed how empty the area looked. Reports claimed the crowd standing behind those barriers was incredibly small, with estimates floating around at roughly 10 people total. And even that number had social media laughing because several viewers pointed out that not everyone there even seemed connected to the event.
Meghan Markle's shocking humiliation in Geneva finally proves that she has just gone. I mean, this was the moment, Nancy Sidley pointed it out, this was the moment, the major defeat on her face when she realized that no one had bothered to show up for what was a catastrophic speech, a hypocritical speech, a speech which blows out of the water.
At least 2 people appeared to simply be walking past the area, while another person spotted in the background was literally riding by on a bicycle. The internet wasted no time turning the moment into memes, jokes, and non-stop commentary, and once that started, things escalated very quickly. The pictures started spreading everywhere almost instantly, and once social media grabbed hold of the story, the comment sections exploded. People weren't just talking about the Geneva appearance itself anymore, they were comparing it side by side with other royal appearances, and that's where things got brutal, fast. One comparison kept showing up over and over again online: Princess Catherine's Italy tour. Videos and photos from that trip had crowds packed into the streets, with reports saying some people drove for hours just to catch a glimpse of her in person. People online pointed to how naturally she interacted with children, how relaxed she looked while speaking Italian, making pasta, greeting families, and moving through the crowds without it feeling staged or forced. Whether fair or not, viewers kept saying the energy around that tour felt effortless and genuine in a way they believed Geneva simply didn't. And social media did not hold back. The comparisons became non-stop, with clips bouncing across platforms alongside sarcastic comments, memes, and criticism pouring in from every direction. By the end of the weekend, many people were openly calling the Geneva event a public relations nightmare. The focus had completely shifted away from the actual speech and onto the optics surrounding the appearance itself.
British Airways whistleblowers had revealed that she is one of the worst passengers to ever travel on their airline.
Then came the sudden image reset attempt that really caught people's attention. Almost immediately after the backlash reached its peak, a glowing article suddenly appeared in People magazine through what was described as a source close to the Duchess. And let's be honest, royal watchers know exactly what that wording usually means. Whenever stories appear through unnamed insiders like that, people instantly start wondering who really wanted the story out there in the first place. The article painted an almost unbelievably warm scene. According to the report, British Airways cabin crew had supposedly surprised Meghan during a flight with a heartfelt anniversary celebration, marking 8 years of marriage to Prince Harry. There was a personal card. Champagne! Special British candies for the children! Smiling crew members sharing emotional memories about the royal wedding day. The whole thing sounded polished down to the smallest detail, almost like every piece had been carefully selected to create the perfect feel-good headline at exactly the right moment. And that timing is what made critics suspicious immediately. The article landed right as negative coverage from Geneva was dominating online discussions, which had many people questioning whether the story was really spontaneous at all. To a lot of observers, it looked less like a random act of kindness and more like a carefully timed distraction designed to shift public conversation away from the criticism. But then another layer got added to the situation. And this is where the story became even more controversial. Journalist Dan Wootton discussed claims from a whistleblower whose account reportedly goes back years before this week's drama ever happened. According to that account, Meghan had allegedly developed a very negative reputation with some British Airways staff long before marrying into the royal family. And the wording people focused on was especially harsh. The claim did not describe her as merely difficult or demanding. According to the whistleblower account being discussed online, she was reportedly described as one of the worst passengers to ever travel on British Airways.
Upgrades, that was before she met Prince Harry, and she refused to even look after Archie on the flight, and he was crying for a long time before the nannies got involved.
That phrase spread quickly because of how extreme it sounded. And once it started circulating beside the anniversary story, people immediately began questioning how believable the sudden, glowing airline tribute really was. According to the allegations that have circulated for years, the stories about Meghan's past interactions with airline staff were anything but flattering. Reports claimed she was allegedly rude toward flight attendants during certain trips, with some accounts describing tense exchanges behind the scenes that supposedly left crew members frustrated long after the flights ended. None of these claims were ever presented as official findings, but the stories spread widely enough that royal watchers kept bringing them back up whenever discussions about public image started heating up again. Then there were the claims about seating upgrades, which became another major talking point online. According to the reports being discussed, she allegedly pushed for first-class upgrades on flights where those upgrades reportedly were not even available in the first place. Critics online mocked the idea heavily, saying that asking louder does not magically create extra first-class seats out of thin air. The story kept resurfacing because people felt it added to a larger picture critics had already built in their minds about difficult celebrity behaviour behind closed doors. Another allegation that sparked strong reactions involved flights taken with baby Archie years ago. Reports claimed that during moments when the child became upset or started crying, staff allegedly noticed long periods where nannies handled the situation instead. Online discussions around this became extremely heated, with supporters defending Meghan and critics using the claims to question her public image as a hands-on parent. As always with royal gossip, the internet quickly split into competing sides, each convinced their version of events told the real story. None of these stories painted a positive picture when they first appeared, and now they've suddenly become relevant again because of the anniversary flight narrative that appeared this week. That's why so many people immediately paused when they heard the glowing British Airways story being promoted so heavily. Critics started asking the obvious question right away. Are people seriously expected to believe that the very same airline crew members who allegedly dealt with years of difficult interactions suddenly decided, somewhere high above the Atlantic Ocean, that this was the perfect moment to organise a heartfelt anniversary celebration? And this wasn't just some tiny gesture either. The story described warm smiles, thoughtful gifts, emotional memories, champagne, candies for the children, and personal attention that sounded almost unbelievably picture-perfect. For many viewers online, the contrast between the old allegations and this brand new, polished narrative felt impossible to ignore. That disconnect is exactly why social media exploded with skepticism almost immediately after the article dropped. Some critics even joked that Meghan's name had allegedly become shorthand among certain airline staff for a specific type of demanding celebrity passenger, which only made the anniversary story sound even more surprising to people already questioning it. Fair or unfair, once those older rumours resurfaced beside the new magazine feature, the internet started treating the entire situation like a carefully managed public relations move instead of an authentic surprise. And that's really the heart of why this story keeps gaining traction. It's not just about one article or one flight. People are looking at the timing, the past allegations, the carefully packaged emotional details, and the sudden flood of positive coverage, all happening right after a rough weekend of online criticism. That combination is what turned this from a simple celebrity news item into a much bigger conversation across royal media channels.
Has just rumbled this as a big, fat fake. So look at this. Tash revealed, wait, what? Meghan arranged an anniversary card to be given to her on her flight. She pre-ordered and then gave the exclusive to People magazine. And then Tash delivered the receipts. Look at this. And we're going to read through this together because Meghan's just been well and truly rumbled.
Now, this is where the story really starts getting messy, because a woman named Tash came forward with what many online are calling actual receipts. And those receipts completely changed the conversation around this supposedly spontaneous anniversary surprise. Once people started looking into the details more carefully, the polished fairy tale version of events suddenly didn't seem nearly as magical as it first appeared. According to information shared online, British Airways already offers an official service for passengers celebrating special occasions like anniversaries, birthdays, and milestone events during flights. And once people discovered that, a lot of the mystery surrounding this heartfelt surprise immediately started fading away. Instead of sounding like a random emotional gesture from crew members who were personally touched by Meghan and Harry's love story, critics began pointing out that this might simply have been part of a pre-arranged airline service available to many passengers. The process itself is reportedly very straightforward. Passengers can contact British Airways ahead of time to let staff know they're celebrating something important. Then, after boarding, they can reportedly inform the cabin crew directly, so arrangements can be made during the flight. According to the airline's service description being discussed online, crew members may then choose, at their discretion, to present a complimentary bottle of champagne along with a signed card recognising the occasion. Pretty standard airline hospitality stuff, not exactly some once-in-a-lifetime royal tribute. But then came the detail that really blew the whole debate wide open online. According to the service description people started sharing, British Airways does not actually provide official standalone anniversary cards themselves. Instead, passengers are reportedly encouraged to bring their own personal card on board beforehand. The crew can then sign that card and present it back later during the flight as part of the surprise experience. And the second that detail surfaced, social media practically exploded. Because suddenly people weren't just asking whether the celebration happened, they were questioning who may have organised it in the first place. Critics immediately started wondering whether the card described in the People magazine story might not have been some spontaneous emotional creation from the airline staff at all, but rather part of a pre-arranged process handled ahead of time like any other anniversary request. Now, to be fair, Nobody publicly proved exactly how the situation unfolded on that specific flight, and it's important not to jump beyond the available information. But people online quickly connected the dots for themselves once they saw how the official service reportedly works. That's why the timing and presentation of the story suddenly became even more controversial than before. And then there's the card itself, which became another major talking point across royal gossip channels. The handwritten message reportedly read, "Dearest Harry and Meghan, with love, the whole British Airways family." A crew member identified as Richie Rich allegedly signed it and, according to online discussions, apparently signed it twice. That tiny detail alone sent comment sections into chaos, with viewers debating whether the entire thing looked overly staged, oddly theatrical, or simply misunderstood. For critics already skeptical about the anniversary article, this new information only added more fuel to the conversation. They argued that what had originally been presented as a touching surprise from adoring airline staff now looked much more like a carefully coordinated experience packaged into a glowing media story at the exact moment positive headlines were desperately needed. And once those questions entered the conversation, the internet did what it always does. People started dissecting every tiny detail, frame by frame, line by line, signature by signature, trying to figure out what really happened behind the scenes on that flight.
That she didn't turn around and say, "And there was a moment when all of the crew dropped to their knees, they took off their hats and thanked me."
The detail that really sent social media into detective mode was the card itself reportedly being signed twice by the same crew member. And once people noticed that, the reactions online became brutal fast. Critics immediately started joking that nothing says totally spontaneous, heartfelt moment quite like somebody accidentally signing the same prop 2 times. Fair or unfair, that tiny mistake became one of the most discussed parts of the entire story, because it made the carefully polished presentation suddenly feel a little less natural and a little more staged to many viewers watching from home. And of course, where did this emotional anniversary story conveniently end up? People magazine, naturally. That detail alone had royal watchers rolling their eyes because the publication has long been viewed online as one of the friendliest outlets when it comes to coverage connected to Meghan and Harry. Critics often claim that whenever there's a need for soft-focused storytelling, emotional framing, glowing anonymous quotes, and perfectly curated human moments, People is usually the place where those stories appear first. According to the article, the cabin crew reportedly came over to personally wish Meghan and Harry a happy anniversary during the flight. The piece described staff members warmly sharing memories of where they were back in 2018 when the royal wedding took place, creating this cinematic image of an entire airline crew emotionally reflecting on the big day years later while serving passengers somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. And this is the point where a lot of readers stopped and said, wait, seriously? Because many people immediately questioned how realistic that interaction actually sounded. Commercial airline staff are usually incredibly busy, managing passengers, handling safety responsibilities, preparing food service, answering call buttons, organising boarding, dealing with delays, and solving non-stop in-flight issues. Most passengers barely exchange more than a few polite words with cabin crew during long-haul flights. That's why the description raised so many eyebrows online. People joked that they had flown countless times in their lives and never once experienced a flight attendant casually stopping by to discuss personal memories connected to a public event from 7 years earlier. Not during overnight red-eye flights, not during chaotic delays, not during exhausting international travel days when everyone on board just wants snacks, sleep, or legroom. The idea sounded oddly theatrical to many readers, almost like a scene written specifically to create emotional headlines, rather than a normal interaction that naturally unfolded during a working shift. But according to the article, this flight was apparently different. This crew was supposedly uniquely invested in celebrating Meghan and Harry's anniversary in a deeply personal way. That's the narrative people were being asked to believe. And online reactions quickly split into two very different camps. Supporters viewed it as a harmless, sweet gesture. Critics saw something much more calculated behind the scenes. Because once the British Airways anniversary service details surfaced online, another theory started spreading rapidly. People began suggesting that the entire celebration may have been arranged before Meghan even boarded the aircraft through the airline's official milestone request system. Again, nobody publicly proved that happened in this exact case, but the existence of the service itself completely changed how many viewers interpreted the article afterward. And honestly, the timing is what kept pushing the conversation into overdrive. The People magazine story appeared incredibly fast, within roughly 48 hours of Meghan's Geneva appearance becoming one of the internet's favourite targets for jokes and criticism all weekend long. That's why so many observers became suspicious immediately. The speed of the turnaround felt almost too perfect. The Geneva clips and photos were still everywhere online at that point. Social media was packed with discussions about the crowd barriers, the reportedly tiny audience, the viral images showing nearly empty spaces outside the event, the cyclist riding casually through the background, and even random bystanders who people joked looked like they were simply waiting nearby rather than attending the speech itself. Memes were circulating non-stop, and critics were hammering the event from every angle. Then suddenly, almost overnight, the conversation shifted. Out came the glossy anniversary story filled with warmth, kindness, nostalgia, and carefully emotional details. There were heartfelt quotes. Champagne, personalised cards, British candies for the children, friendly airline staff reflecting emotionally on the royal wedding. Every element seemed designed to create a softer and more sympathetic image at the exact moment the public narrative had turned sharply negative. That sudden transition is exactly why the story gained so much traction online. To critics, it didn't feel random at all. It felt strategic. One set of headlines was dominating social media, and before the internet could fully settle on the Geneva criticism, another polished human interest story appeared ready to redirect attention somewhere warmer and more flattering. And once people started noticing how neatly all those pieces fit together, the internet did what it always does. It began pulling apart every tiny detail, looking for signs that the spontaneous anniversary moment may not have been spontaneous at all. What many critics believe happened here fits into a communications strategy often described as flooding the zone. The idea is simple: you don't directly fight the bad headlines once they start spreading everywhere online. Instead, you release a completely different story that is warmer, softer, and emotionally distracting enough to dominate the conversation instead. Suddenly, people stop focusing on the criticism because they're too busy discussing the newer, shinier headline that just appeared out of nowhere. That's why so many royal watchers immediately became skeptical about the British Airways anniversary story. To critics, the article looked less like a random touching moment and more like a carefully timed image reset. Instead of addressing the backlash surrounding the Geneva speech, the internet suddenly got handed a sentimental story involving champagne, smiling airline staff, anniversary celebrations, handwritten cards, and emotional memories from the royal wedding. It shifted the tone of the conversation almost overnight. And in fairness, public figures from every corner of entertainment, politics, and royalty use media strategies all the time. That alone isn't unusual. What made this situation different for many observers was the specific airline involved and the older allegations connected to it. Critics pointed out that British Airways was already tied to years of negative rumours and stories surrounding Meghan's alleged interactions with staff members. Because of that history, the sudden appearance of a glowing airline tribute immediately raised suspicion instead of admiration for a lot of people online. That contradiction became the heart of the entire debate. People kept asking how an airline reportedly connected to years of unpleasant experiences suddenly transformed into the setting for a picture-perfect anniversary celebration filled with warmth and affection. Whether the answer is simple coincidence, pre-arranged hospitality, or something more strategic, the contrast itself is what made the story explode across social media. And according to many long-time royal commentators, this is not the first time critics have accused Meghan's media team of promoting carefully timed stories centered around spontaneous public admiration.
Thanked me for the work that I've just done in Geneva, for my service that I've just committed to. She is honestly, she's a walking embarrassment with stuff like this because people can see through it all.
One example repeatedly mentioned online was the Drew Barrymore showcard situation, which sparked its own wave of internet discussion at the time, because viewers questioned how naturally certain emotional moments unfolded during the appearance. Then there was the American Airlines flight attendant story that circulated heavily online before later facing major questions and criticism itself. That situation also involved claims of warm public support and emotional praise connected to Meghan during travel, which is why critics started grouping these incidents together into what they believe is a repeating media strategy. Now, supporters would argue that positive stories naturally appear around public figures all the time, and that critics are reading too much into ordinary celebrity coverage. But opponents see something much more deliberate happening behind the scenes. They believe there's a consistent formula being repeated. Create an uplifting emotional moment, allow it to reach a friendly media outlet through unnamed sources, present the story as completely organic, and let the positive headlines overpower whatever negative conversation was happening before. And honestly, that formula can work extremely well, at least for a while. Modern media moves fast, public attention shifts quickly, and emotional stories often spread further than criticism does. But according to critics, the strategy starts running into serious problems once audiences begin noticing the pattern itself. Because the real issue here isn't whether one airline crew gave someone champagne or signed a card. The deeper issue is credibility. Once people begin questioning whether emotional public moments are authentic or carefully arranged, every future story faces heavier scrutiny automatically. Audiences start examining details more closely, comparing timelines, checking inconsistencies, and looking for signs of image management, instead of simply accepting the story at face value. And that's why believability matters so much in public relations. Trust is difficult to build, but incredibly easy to damage. Once skepticism settles in, even genuinely kind or harmless moments can end up viewed through a suspicious lens because people no longer feel confident they're seeing the full reality behind the scenes. That's exactly why this British Airways story became so much bigger than just one anniversary flight. To critics, it represented something larger. A growing public perception that carefully polished emotional narratives are being pushed too aggressively and too predictably for audiences not to notice the strategy behind them anymore. And this is the bigger problem critics say now follows every carefully polished story connected to Meghan and Harry. Once public skepticism reaches a certain level, every emotional moment starts getting questioned automatically. Every heartfelt gesture, every supposedly spontaneous celebration, every anonymous source close to the Duchess speaking warmly to People magazine about how touched or emotional Meghan supposedly felt in private. According to critics, those stories no longer arrive looking natural to large sections of the public. Instead, they arrive already carrying the feeling of a media stunt before readers even finish the first paragraph. That's what many online believe has changed over the past several years. The public reaction itself is different now. People no longer simply consume the headline and move on. They immediately start checking the timing, comparing narratives, looking at patterns, and asking who benefits from the story appearing exactly when it did. Fair or unfair, the reputation surrounding these kinds of stories has created a level of suspicion that now follows almost every new positive headline. So now the question being debated everywhere online is simple. Was this British Airways anniversary story genuinely spontaneous, or did the timing reveal something much more deliberate happening behind the scenes? That's exactly the debate filling royal forums, comment sections, YouTube channels, and social media feeds right now, because the overlap between the Geneva backlash and the sudden anniversary coverage felt impossible for many people to ignore. Some believe the crew members were simply being kind during a milestone celebration. Others think the entire thing looked carefully coordinated from the beginning. And the more details that surfaced about airline anniversary services, magazine leaks, and the timing of the article, the more intense the conversation became online. But here's the irony critics keep coming back to over and over again. For years, Meghan Markle's public image has been heavily built around the idea of authenticity. The entire Sussex brand has consistently emphasised being relatable, emotionally honest, compassionate, and deeply connected to ordinary people. That has always been one of the central themes surrounding their interviews, public appearances, documentaries, speeches, and media projects. The message has repeatedly been that what Meghan and Harry offer the public is something real, real emotion, real vulnerability, real experiences, real compassion, real relationships with people they meet around the world. That authenticity has been presented as the defining difference between their approach and the traditional royal system they stepped away from years ago. That's why moments like the Geneva speech were framed so seriously. It was meant to look like meaningful leadership connected to an important modern issue involving children's online safety and digital protection. Then came the British Airways story, which appeared designed to reinforce the idea that ordinary people, even airline crews during random flights, are naturally drawn toward Meghan because of genuine admiration and warmth. And according to critics, the reason these stories often struggle to land the way they were likely intended isn't necessarily because of hatred or bias. The deeper issue, they argue, is credibility. Once audiences begin feeling like too many emotional moments are carefully packaged for publicity, even sincere interactions can start feeling overly produced in the eyes of the public. That's why people online kept repeating the same criticism throughout this entire week. Truly authentic moments usually don't need this much framing around them. They don't need perfectly timed magazine exclusives appearing within days of negative headlines. They don't need elaborate emotional descriptions delivered through unnamed insider sources. And they definitely don't usually involve tiny details like a card reportedly being signed twice by the same person that accidentally make the whole thing look more staged than natural. Critics also pointed to the Geneva crowd situation as part of the same larger image problem. The crowd barriers, the sparse turnout shown in photos, the viral clips of random passers-by and cyclists moving through the scene, all of it became symbolic online of what critics describe as a disconnect between the image being presented and the reality audiences believe they're seeing with their own eyes. Because genuinely powerful public moments tend to create their own momentum naturally. When something feels real to people, crowds gather without being pushed. Support spreads organically. Emotional reactions happen in real time without needing carefully crafted magazine narratives afterward to explain why the moment mattered. And many critics immediately compared that feeling to Princess Catherine's Italy visit, which had flooded social media days earlier with videos of children running excitedly toward her, crowds packing the streets, and interactions that viewers described as effortless and unscripted. Supporters of Catherine argued those moments resonated so strongly because they appeared naturally emotional without needing extra explanation afterward from unnamed sources or coordinated media leaks. That comparison is what made this entire week so damaging from a public relations perspective, according to many royal commentators. It wasn't just that one event received criticism while another received praise. It was that audiences felt they could sense the difference between moments they viewed as organic and moments they believed were being carefully manufactured for headlines. And once that perception settles into public opinion, critics say it becomes incredibly difficult to reverse, because every future story gets filtered through that same skepticism before people even decide whether they believe it or not. And there's one final layer to this entire situation that many royal watchers believe makes the story feel even more uncomfortable. Critics online have also pointed to the symbolism surrounding Meghan's return to Britain itself. This trip marked one of her rare visits back through the UK following Queen Elizabeth II's funeral, which was widely viewed as her last major official appearance on British soil before this recent London stopover. That context matters because, fairly or unfairly, every royal-related headline connected to Britain still ends up measured against the legacy Queen Elizabeth left behind. According to critics, that's what makes the British Airways anniversary story feel especially awkward to some observers. Meghan reportedly passed quietly through Heathrow Airport, travelled home following a speech that had already become the centre of online criticism over turnout and optics. And then suddenly a glowing anniversary story appeared in an American celebrity magazine packed with emotional details, champagne, personalised cards, and praise from airline crew members. For many royal traditionalists, the contrast could not have been sharper. Queen Elizabeth spent more than 70 years building an image centred around discipline, restraint, duty, and public service above personal publicity. Her entire reign was built on the idea that the work itself mattered more than media attention surrounding it. She rarely explained herself publicly, rarely chased headlines, and almost never centred personal emotion in the way modern celebrity culture often does today. That's why critics say stories like this, lands so differently when viewed through the lens of royal history. To them, using what appears to have been a prearranged airline anniversary service and allowing the moment to become a polished magazine feature doesn't resemble the quiet style of public service Queen Elizabeth represented for decades. Instead, they argue it feels far more connected to celebrity branding, image management, and strategic media storytelling than traditional royal conduct. Now, supporters would likely say there's nothing wrong with sharing a positive personal moment during difficult media cycles, but opponents continue arguing that the deeper issue is perception. At its most generous interpretation, many critics believe this looked less like a naturally unfolding, heartfelt interaction and more like a public relations decision, carefully packaged to appear deeply personal and spontaneous. And that's why this story has sparked so much debate online over the past week. It's not really about one flight, one card, or one article anymore. It's about trust, image, timing, and whether audiences still believe the emotional narratives being presented to them in these carefully managed media moments. So now we want to hear from you. Do you think the British Airways anniversary surprise was a genuine, spontaneous gesture from the crew, or do you believe the timing tells a very different story? Drop your thoughts down in the comments because Raw Report reads every single one! And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next royal story everyone will be talking about.